Good afternoon. Time for part two. We're going to dive right in. We're going to be talking about Peter in our first audio break, but we are definitely going to dive right in to that audio break, which Rend Collective will be taking us to with Come On, My Soul. That was Rend Collective, Come On, My Soul. And we are going to dive into our discussion of the character of Peter. And I don't mean we're going to do a character study. Now, I don't mean we're going to look at Peter and be like, here's all the failures. I want to look at the transformation of Peter from when Jesus was alive and he was following Jesus to after Jesus' resurrection and an ultimate ascension into heaven to be at the Father's right hand. And when that happens, we see an actual full-on change in the man we know as Peter. Simon, who became Peter, first amongst most lists. I don't know if you know this or not, but in most lists, Peter showed up as like first or second. Mostly first. And Peter was very, very excited. If you look at John 20, 1-9, John stuck his head in to see what happened to Jesus. Peter ran head first, like he went right in. And when you think about that, we pictured him running into this like man-sized hole, but the fact is they would have been much smaller. So he would have had to stoop down and and it wasn't easy to run into one of these tombs. And he definitely fell at times, but he was also very committed. You look at Mark 10:28. Jesus looked at him and said starting in 27, Mark 27 through 10:27 through start in 26. The disciples were even more amazed and said to each other, "Who then can be saved?" Jesus looked at them and said, "With man this is impossible, but not with God. All things are possible with God." Peter said to him, "Well, we've left everything to follow you." And Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, no one who has left home or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or fields for me and the gospel will fail to receive 100 times as much in this present age, and in the age to come eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first." And knowing that Peter's first on most of the lists of the apostles, you're going to wonder if that means he's going to be last on the rest of the lists. But also, if you look, and then if you go and you look at John 13:9, Jesus is washing the disciples' feet. He poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them. He came to Simon Peter, who said, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus looked at him and replied, "You do not realize what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said, "No, you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." Which Simon Peter then replied, "Well then, Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." And Jesus answered, "A person who had a bath only needs to wash his feet. The rest of his body is clean. Are you clean, though not every one of you?" For he knew who was going to betray him, and not everyone was clean. But he's washing Peter's feet, and when he tells Peter, who doesn't understand, he obviously doesn't understand why Jesus is washing his feet, but he says, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. And Peter's like, "Well, then wash all of me, Lord." And Peter did put Jesus first most of his life, most of the time. And he did so at the risk of his own life. But I want to look at this part of Peter that is his denial and his failure of the Lord. And when, at one point, when Jesus looks at him and get behind me, he said, "Get behind me, Satan." He said to Peter, which is Matthew 16 and verse 23, but we'll start at 21. From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. "This shall never happen, never, Lord, this shall never happen to you," said Peter. Jesus then turned to Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You have not in mind the things of God, but the things of men." This is the man who just a short time ago, he said, "I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." That was just, what, 5 verses earlier or something like that. And now it's, "Get behind me, Satan." So think about this. First of all, I don't think Satan here means what we come to believe it means, which is the devil, Satan, Lucifer himself. Lucifer isn't even his name, really. We went through an extensive study on that, talking about how Lucifer, the actual word that comes from is light in Hebrew or Greek. I don't remember which one, and it's like they assume because at one point he spoke about him being the light bringer, but that's not even about him. That's a whole nother month worth of videos to study and talk about that. This is more, and this isn't like Judas when Judas was possessed. It actually says that Judas was possessed. I don't know if I can find it real quick here, but when Judas betrays Jesus, it says that Satan entered him. So he went and he was looking for an opportunity to hand him over. So this isn't like that. I'm going to find that real quick, but this isn't like that. This isn't really like that kind of, like, he didn't just he didn't just get taken over by an evil spirit or something that turned into, and the thing is that when Judas, and I believe Judas was possessed. Now, you can show me where you want, that it isn't a thing. Prove to me biblically that I'm wrong. And you might be able to, because I'm recognizing that I absolutely could be wrong about this. But when you look at, I was trying to find it here because I know it's in here. Jesus was speaking with Judas. Now, the betrayer has... No, that's when he... Well, I'll look around a little bit more while we continue to talk. But I think I'm on air, so let's next break we'll talk a little bit about that because we're at like 8 minutes because I got lost a little bit. Kim Hill coming up right now. I forgot I had the audio running. It may not matter since apparently it's 20 after. So there's this place. Helps if I spell words right, huh? Luke 22. So we go back here and we look in Luke. We go to chapter 22. 19, 20, 21, 22. Peter disowns Jesus. No, okay. Last Supper. Okay, so he gave the bread in 24. However, stuck with me in my I know it's in here. Luke 22, and it's right around 1920. Let's see here. We'll back a page. He took bread and gave it. This is my body. In the same way, also a dispute amongst them came up. He said that he would be betrayed, and they began to argue. And then they argued about the king of the Gentiles. And then Peter says he's ready to go. And I tell you, and then he said to them, see, I know it's in here. About Judas betraying him. And Satan entered into Judas, and he did what he must do. Of course, and again, maybe that's somewhere else I should have heard it. I know we talked about it. 22. No. And he went and did it. I'm not finding it. Which is odd. It's usually pretty easy. (22:3) it says. 22:3 it says here. So let's go look and see. 22. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, I was looking in the wrong place. Then Satan entered. This is verse 22, or chapter 22, verse 3 of Luke. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judas went to the chief priests and officers and temples of the guard, or temple guard, and discussed with them how he might betray Jesus. They were delighted, and then when Satan leaves him later, he regrets it, throws the silver back, and then he goes and kills himself. Right? So, I mean, Judas was a pretty shifty guy to begin with, it sounds like, but it seems that when the enemy had that opportunity, he took it, entered him, and took him. This is not what happened when Peter tells Jesus that he's not going to allow him to be taken to Jerusalem and have to suffer and die. And he tells Satan, or he tells Peter, get behind me, Satan. What he's telling him is, we had a long discussion about this the other day, get in your place. He must have stepped in front of Jesus to rebuke him. He's rebuking the master, and then the master looks at him and says, no, get in your place, get behind me. And Satan, or adversary, is actually, I think, the word there, because Peter then, steps back into place, and then we have the denial, right? And we go through all that stuff, and then in the garden, and we're going to talk about in the garden here in a minute, because when you see Peter in the garden, and then you see Peter after the crucifixion, it's two different people. Seriously, and I'm going to prove it after Hank Williams takes us to the next break. That was Hank Williams Sr. here on God's Love Live with Chuckles in the morning, the afternoon. I don't know, what is it? Afternoon? How's it going? Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're enjoying the music, staying safe, happy, and healthy out there. We've been talking about Peter. And I wanted to do this character study and study of Peter as the first one, not because I want to go, look, this great man of the Bible who wasn't nearly as great as we thought he was. Nope, I want to talk about the difference between Peter from Matthew 16:21, when Jesus is predicting his death, and from the Garden of Gethsemane, see if I can pronounce that properly, where he chops off the ear. We all know the story. Chops off the ear. Was it the garden? Yeah. Of the soldier. So we're going to talk about those two things real quick, and then we're going to talk about the very beginning of the first book of Peter to show the difference. So Jesus began to explain to his disciples, verse 21 of Matthew 16, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things at the hands of the elders and chief priests, teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day. He would be raised to life. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. No, Lord, never, Lord, this shall never happen to you. And Jesus then turned to Peter. Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. Now, I don't think this was the same as in Luke 22 in verse 3, where you see Satan entering Judas to make him, betray Jesus, which is actually, if you look at Luke 22, verse 3, as we did prior to this, it says, then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, one of the 12, and Judas went to the chief priest. So it says Satan, the enemy, the adversary, I don't know if it's the devil or one of his minions, entered into Judas and made Judas betray the Lord. Now, he couldn't have entered into Judas if there wasn't that weakness there. So this is not an excuse for Judas's behavior. It does not dismiss his behavior. We just need to understand the difference between that and this. I don't think any enemy was causing Peter to say, no, we're not going to let them kill you, Lord. And this was Peter's own hubris in thinking that what was important was the physical military overthrowing of the Roman government right now. That's how he felt. That's why he then turns around in Gethsemane, and the men stepped forward to seize Jesus. They arrested him with that. One of Jesus' companions drew his sword out and struck a servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. And this one, it doesn't tell us it's Peter, but if you look at Mark or Luke, it's in both of those, and it probably does, one of them at least tells us it's Peter. Let's look at Mark 22:40. Was it Mark 22:40? No, Mark 14:32. In Mark 14:32, they went to the place called Gethsemane. Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. I'm going to jump down. Then he returned to his disciples, found them sleeping. Returned a third time. Then as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him a crowd armed with swords, clubs, sent from the chief priests. And he kissed them. Then one of those standing near, again, it doesn't actually say Peter. All right, let's check Luke 22. See, this is one of those things that we learn together in two of the gospel accounts, at least. It doesn't actually say Peter. Now, I'm betting you Luke. If anybody's going to give the name, it's going to be Luke, huh? And here we go. No, same thing. How do we know it was Peter if it doesn't? John 18, 3 through 11. Let's see if it's in John, because now we're through three of the Gospels. And so far, I haven't found confirmation that it was Peter. I've believed my entire life it was Peter. Okay. When Jesus was arrested, I am he. They drew back and fell to the ground. Let's see, knowing what was going to happen. I told you that I am he. Okay, here we go. Verse 10 of John 18. Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus commanded Peter, put away your sword. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me? And we know from the other Gospels that he then healed that ear. This is Peter prior to our Lord's crucifixion. Now, in a little bit, he's going to turn around and he's going to deny Christ. And then the rooster crows, and then he runs off with all the others being a coward. That's right, I said it. He was a man full of bravado that wanted to fight the Romans when Jesus was alive, and he thought Jesus was going to miraculously make this a thing. Then Jesus died, and he kind of cowered for a minute, and then he was resurrected. And then, and this is where we get into some stuff that people look at me like I'm crazy sometimes when I say, but if we go back to Luke again, and we go to the end of Luke, clear back at the end, let's see. This is where Jesus appears to the disciples in the upper room. They were still talking about that. Jesus himself stood among them. They were startled, frightened, thinking he was a ghost. And here's the biggie. Verse 40 of chapter 24 of Luke. He tells them to touch him, and they see that he's flesh and bone. And then he says, then he shows them his hands and feet. They touch him. They gave him a piece of broiled fish. He took it and ate it while they were there. Verse 45 is where we want to go. Verse 45 of Luke 24. Then he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures. He told them, this is what is written. The Christ will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. And repentance and forgiveness of sin will be preached in his name to all of the nations, beginning at Jerusalem. Beginning at Jerusalem. Here's the thing. He opened their minds. This is huge. I mean, huge. Because he opened their minds so they could understand the scriptures in a way no one else had. I think this is where at least the finish of what we're going to talk about in the next break, which is the transformation of Peter from militant to meek follower of Christ. Not even kidding. Right now, Hillsong United coming right up. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Oh, it's already passed. Is it really? No. Maybe. I can't really tell. I could have missed. That was Jim Reeves here on God'sLoveLive.com with Chuckles in the afternoon. How's it going, folks? Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're enjoying the music. Staying safe, happy, and healthy. And we were talking about Peter, and we are going to continue to talk about Peter. I want to talk about his address in Acts. Now, Jesus had been crucified. He came back. He was resurrected. He was there. He was in front of them. And then he ascends. Peter, this militant man who we know wanted to go to war with the Romans, then addresses the crowd. Only he never asked them to take vengeance. It didn't matter. He was like, nope, we're good. Um, and there's something going on. So I actually, here's Chris Lulin, honest. I'm going to cut this video short because I hear my wife over here talking. It sounds like it might be something that I need to go find out what's going on. So I will ask you guys to forgive me.